Greetings, my name is Darlene Herbert, and I will present to you today Chapter 3 in Jean Agnon's book entitled Federal Policies That Keep People Poor. Chapter 3 is an important chapter since it shows Agnon's ongoing analysis of federal policies that promote low-wage employment, regardless of educational attainment, which she believes are directly linked to school reform that have adverse consequences to African American and Latino communities. According to Agnon, Americans have always held tightly to the belief that receiving an education would raise the economic prospects of the poor. Even the federal government promoted the policy assumptions that the more education a person received, either through college or job training, would ultimately put poor people to work, as a result, substantially reducing U.S. poverty. However, to Agnon, the research does not support this claim. Never before has there ever been a time in history where there is such an educated and diverse workforce, yet wages continue to fall and the poverty level continues to rise. Agnon proposes that until we make some changes in the way our political economy works, current economic policy will continue to trump not only urban school reform, but the individual educational achievement of urban students as well. She identifies two major policies which she believes are responsible for poverty wage work: the minimum wage legislation and federal policies that prevent people from union organizing. The first economic policy under review, the minimum wage policy, is a provision of the Fair Labor Standards Act, which was passed in 1938. This law was crafted as a direct result of massive political demonstrations and social movement organizations during the Great Depression. The sole intent of this policy was to set a minimum wage and standards for overtime compensation for all workers. Therefore, since wages increases are legislated by Congress, the wage amount of workers are therefore based solely at congressional discretion. Using the stats compiled from the Economic Policy Institute to show the trend of the real value of the minimum wage, Agnon's analysis reveals the extent to which minimum wage workers characterize jobs in America. The data shows that minimum wage has not kept pace with the rising cost of living and therefore has contributed to growth inequality and to the increase in poverty wages for a large percentage of American workers. To date, the vast majority of America's lowest paid workers, 66%, are employed by large corporations. She attributes these disparities to large corporations who have recovered from the recession and are in a strong position financially, but simply have adopted the posture of paying their workers poor wages since profits are at an all-time high and replacement workers are easy to find. Agnon also highlights how political movements have and can play an integral role towards raising the minimum wage rates as it has in some states. However, until workers recognize that poverty wage is a political decision, one made by Congress, she believes it will continue to be a determining factor of who lives in poverty. Her second area of scrutiny is union membership. In discussing the decline in unionization, she reiterates the connection between the rise of poverty wages and the decline in income are the results of many factors made, again, by those mostly at the federal level. She discusses how deregulation from private and public investments, deregulation of large industries such as trucking, airlines, and telecommunications have lowered workers' wages. Also, how globalized trade pacts like the North American Free Trade Agreement and the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade encourages U.S. companies to find sites across the globe with lower taxes and cheaper labor for production. As a result, this mindset helps to maintain low-wage full-time workers who remain poor due to wages while at the same time decreasing their bargaining power. Decline in unions not only reduces their power to demand higher pay, but also their powers and ability to organize. Agnon reminds us that the decline of union in the workforce is ultimately a federal policy, one that penalizes workers for attempting to organize. As an aspiring future educational leader, two issues Agnon raised from the chapter readings cause me to reflect on federal policies which still holds broad implication on the lives of minority students. Number one, is education the arena for bringing a social movement to current economic and social policies for our students? And two, are schools really making a difference in student life opportunities? And if so, how? Both questions illuminated for the text for me are issues that educational leaders must contend with daily in their roles as both the operations and instructional leaders of the schools. As leaders, Jean Agnon reminds us that the system can and has been challenged through collective agency and organized resistance. She proposes that we as leaders direct our attention to federal, state, and local policies that maintain poverty for minority students and position ourselves to combat educational injustice through social and political activism. I also believe she alludes to us to review history and learn the lessons of previous movements to bring about real change. Change through the use of social media, think tank groups, scholars, parents, community leaders, and activists in order to compete in today's political environment. While I agree with Agnon's argument asserting the school reform, must come with social reform, I'm still left with a great deal of uncertainty as to how do we get there. However, I do know as a leader, we must start by mobilizing parents to become active participants in helping us to improve our neighborhood, schools, while at the same time destroying the myth of the bootstrapping narratives to policies that no longer help those stuck at the bottom, the poor. Historically, the lack of social and economic mobility, as outlined in Agnon's analysis, supports that a massive grassroots movement is needed. This movement pressures politicians to enact legislation that influence national educational policies as well as social and political change.